Okay, I think we're going to get started here. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this evening program titled Camouflage versus the Rainbow. So we're talking about living life in color with our guest today, Donovan Thompson. I am Ijeoma Nwaogu. I'm the Associate Director for the Multicultural Center, which is part of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at Rice University. For this program, Donovan will engage us in an immersive conversation about owning your LGBTQ plus identity and moving through life, owning your space and your perspective. I'd like to acknowledge our partners for this program, Anthony Nguyen, who is the president of Rice Pride, and Sarah Hall-Swan, who is the president of Rice Queer Student Association. So thank you for partnering with us for this program. The format of this gathering today is to hear from Donovan and engage by asking any questions you may have. I really encourage you to submit your questions in the Q&A section. I am now welcoming Anthony to take the stage.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anthony. Like Dr. Nwaogu mentioned, I am the president of Rice Pride, which basically covers all undergraduate LGBTQ plus life on campus, whether that be through social events or partnering with other organizations like the ODI, the Multicultural Center, for events like these. We're super excited to help host this event tonight. Donovan is the executive producer of the Grapevine, which is a YouTube digital show with over 20 million views, where Millennials and Gen Zs dialogue about trending global issues. Donovan, if you want to take it away.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much, Ijeoma, Anthony, Sarah, and just, Rice University for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. And this topic of living life in color, let me tell you, it's really important to me because it changed my life, and it's sort of easier said than done, and we'll get into it. But I found that it's completely possible to live boldly and proudly in this life by tapping into your authenticity. So I'll get into this story about like how I got to this place, but you may agree that it often feels like we're incentivized to blend in, right? Like do the TikTok challenge, get on Instagram, put on the filter, you know what I'm saying? Do whatever you have to do to fit in. And I think that there's a freedom that comes with radical authenticity. So, a little bit about me, I'm from Brooklyn. I grew up in a very typical Jamaican family in the 90s where homophobia and religiosity were the name of the game, And one of my earliest memories of being, like super young, I was in my uncle's basement. And if anybody is Jamaican or Caribbean on this call, it was a bashment party that he was having, right? And he was getting ready to throw this party. And I actually listened to some of the words of the reggae song that was playing in the background. And it was extremely homophobic. They were saying crazy ass things, essentially calling for the killing of gay men. And I thought to myself, I was around 7. I thought to myself, like, these people want to bust down a wine to a song that's calling for the killing of gay people. Like, how insane is that? That was something that I received at 7 years old. And in that moment, a piece of my innocence was like gone. It was absolutely taken away from me because I was fearful. I thought that I wasn't safe, that my family wasn't a safe place, that people wanted to actually kill me. And it felt like a prison because it didn't matter if you were in church. It didn't matter if I was in school, whether I turned on the media. It just felt like every corner that I turned, that I would not be accepted. So my immediate reaction was to blend in, okay? It was to keep that little gay boy hidden down deeply where no one could suspect or find me. So, as I look back at that now, it was a moment of me separating from myself, right? As a means of survival. And it was as a means of keeping my family. And it was a way that I would not be ostracized. And honestly, I really thought that's what my life would be like. And I just want to highlight right now the importance of relationships, because I would say that I was lucky. I don't know, we'll talk about this later, but I don't know if anyone else was this privileged, but I was lucky at around 14 years old to find a great friend. So it was my freshman year of high school and I was in metal shop class. So there's this cranking of the metal and I'm a singer. So I was just singing in my, just softly. And my then best friend, she wanted to be my best friend. She's still my best friend to this day. She comes up to me and she's like, I hear you. I hear you singing. You sound great. Who are you? What's your name? I want to be your friend. And it was an interesting thing because I already had like a little defensiveness to me and understanding that I would not really be appreciated or fully embraced, so I thought. But something told me that there was something really, really significant about her and that I felt safe. It was very strange, but it was amazing. And I just knew that I would be safe around her. So within the first week of our friendship, I told her, listen, I'm gay. Okay. And I want to be honest about that. And you know what she did? She hugged me. She hugged me and she loved me. And even to this day, she still hugs me and she still loves me. And it taught me that there was actually love out there, love outside of my family, just by simply being myself, someone who hasn't threatened to rescind their love based on my sexuality. And in that moment that I realized that like my future wasn't futile. So it was an amazing experience. And I know that was privilege. I feel like most people, or often people, don't get to experience that, but it set me on a path where it started a love affair with this idea of the truth. And I think that queer and trans people often have a time negotiating truth because it comes at a risk of their lives, of our lives. So, the truth helped me design a safer world for myself. So my goal became to experiment with it. So like, who else can I tell? How do I discern who will receive it well? So over the next couple of years, I told a few of my friends, a really small circle, and eventually like a muscle, it expanded and I told more and more and more people. And I was actually willing to lose a couple of friends if I had to, because my best friend made me feel safe. I felt seen finally, and I know that this sounds really peachy and wonderful, but we're about to get into the drama because, baby, the friends were one thing, but I quickly learned that with family was a completely, completely different thing. And that was a rough spot. So my senior year of high school, I'll never forget it. I was by my cousin's house, right? And we were watching music videos. We were just chilling. It was great. And my mother calls me. I pick up the phone. I'm like, hey, what's up, mom? She's like, what's your password for your computer? I'm like, huh? What do you mean? What do you mean about the password for my computer? And she's like, give me the password for your computer. And my heart started beating so fast because I was literally watching every filthy video available to watch. Okay, every single one. I found it and I watched it. And I was like, and also my password was something crazy like crackhead 2 exclamation point. My mother was like, what's wrong with you? What is going on here? So it was downhill from there. And I'll never forget, I was pacing back and forth. My mother pulls up. She's like, come to the car. Get out here right now. I go in the car. And she just looks at me and she's like, what are you doing? What are you doing with yourself? Are you gay? Is that what you want to do with your life? And I was like, no, mom, I was just researching so that I could be prepared and knowledgeable about life, And she's like, that's bullshit. And the conversation was completely weird and completely strange. And it was very, very silent until we got home. And it went a little something like this. So, the Virgin of Seminole. Excuse me, Echo is getting into the conversation. I don't know if you hear her. But basically we went home and my father was there and they called me to the dining room and they sat me down. And my mother well, a lot of things happened. I won't get into the weeds with that, but what the biggest thing was that my parents looked at me and they told me that they would rather that I be dead than gay. This was the beginning of a verification that I knew that my world was going to go upside down and topsy-turvy if I ever had to tell my parents about that. And it was terrifying to hear that, they didn't kick me out of the house, but it was torture. They didn't let me go anywhere. They didn't let me do anything. My senior year was absolute trash. And I was completely at odds with my parents. And over the next few months, it was torturous, but I was lucky because I was heading to college, right? So it was this negotiation of value for me at a time in my life when I was heading to a place where I was going to be on my own. As some of you can relate, being on a college campus, you have to make your own decisions. You have to figure out who you are. You have to lean into your identity or maybe not. But you will have to deal with the ramifications of that. And, for me, I was excited to leave the house, but I would argue that I was underprepared, right? So over the next several years, maybe 5 years, while going through college, I actually didn't speak to my parents. I didn't talk to them very often. If I went home on vacation, I just went to my grandmother's house. I didn't keep in touch with them at all. And even though I was still surrounded in college by very judgy and often religious people, I kind of learned to be myself unapologetically because for the first time, I could say who I was and do what I wanted to do, and I can deal with the ramifications of that. So I built more solid friendships, and I had a moment of realization around 22 that I had to choose myself. That no matter what, just like how I did with the friendships that I was willing to sacrifice, I had to do that with my family, 100%. So I did that, and I realized that I also had to forgive myself for like shitting on myself, you know what I mean? By saying like, you know what, I'm gonna be in the closet. I'm not gonna talk about this. I'm gonna get like a girlfriend, and then hopefully she'll be a lesbian, and then she'll be a lesbian and I'll be gay, and then we can lie to our parents and tell them that we're, you know, I was finding all of these ways of getting out of it. And for the first time I realized like, that's shame. And I had to forgive myself and I had to honor myself. And what that built in me was a keyword that I want everyone to remember, period, is empathy. And I learned empathy for myself in that moment, forgave myself for the way that I treated myself, and it allowed me to extend empathy to other people. And that's the thing about being a queer person or anyone who suffers from adversity, is that when people are treating you like shit, how do you turn that around and still be kind to other people? It's very difficult and it's a negotiation. But outside of this idea of truth, it leads you to a place of power, because that honesty, that authenticity, no one can take it away from you. Nobody, not even your parents who made this own you, can take that away from you. And that's something that I've learned. You know, it's like I spent such a long time hiding and having a guard up that now finally I began to feel like a new person whose confidence was not predicated on other people's opinions, but rather myself and my love and acceptance for myself. So that sounds rosy and fantastic. But, you know, shortly thereafter, my sister died. And you know, like if you, I don't know if anyone has watched The Grapevine, but I'm a far cry now from who I used to be. Way more of a person who was very concerned about what people thought, a perfectionist, all of these things that supplement the fact that people may not like me, that people may hate me. So I really, really worked on that. And when my sister passed away, it just, you know, when people say life is short, when people say you have to live your life boldly, I learned that when my sister, who was at 26, died. She was extremely young, and I promised myself I wasn't gonna live my life in anybody's closet. I was not gonna live under anybody's kneecap, and I was gonna be boldly and proudly myself. So eventually I reached out to the editor of the Huffington Post. This is like right out of college. I was like, I'm gonna be bold. I'm gonna do what the hell I wanna do, and I'm gonna try my best. And you know, the article that I pitched was called Growing Up Gay and Jamaican as if being gay wasn't enough. Hilarious title, but they let me run it. And it was my coming out party. And I felt like people needed to know that there was life worth living and that my world, just like their world, can open up and it could be bigger and better than you could ever have imagined. Now, that sounds great, but I want you to know that I got tons of hate mail, lots of hate mail. I would say like maybe my first 2 articles were mostly hate mail. And the stories though that I did get from people who said, thank you for writing this piece, it means a lot to me. Eventually it grew, and that voice became bigger and bigger and bigger. And I quickly realized that I'm not alone. There are a lot of people who feel this way. There are a lot of people who feel ostracized, and a lot of us are super young and we don't know what the fuck we're doing, and no one is here to provide some insight on what we should be doing next. So, you know, to bring this full circle and, you know, having articles out, now having the Grapevine, is that it was a decade between my mother said I was gonna get, actually she said you're gonna get HIV and die. That's what her exact quote was, which is probably a little bit more asinine, but yeah, full circle 10 years later, I had a conversation with my mother. And while I was doing my work of being my authentic self, she was doing her work as well. And I think that this is important to highlight because oftentimes we feel like we have to hide and we can't be ourselves. But what I learned with my mother, we sat down and she told me, she was like, listen, I was scared. I was scared. Why? Because you were gay. And I grew up learning that gay people are evil and that they need to die and all of these crazy, crazy things. So when you come up and you come to me saying that you're gay or I find this stuff, I'm thinking somebody's gonna hurt my kid. So she was hoping that she could install that fear in me that she had within herself. And we call that trauma. When someone tells you they'd rather you be dead than gay, that's real, real trauma. But in that moment, that same empathy that I built for myself, I extended it to my mother. And understanding that she just did the best that she absolutely could. And we have to begin to see ourselves outside of our experiences and see ourselves inside of who we actually are. how does your experience get you closer to who you actually are? So my mother and I are like this. We're homies. I talk to my mother every day. The process was about teaching her how to treat me by showing up and being brave and bold about who I was and who I am. And I also was willing to sacrifice her as well. That's the other part of the puzzle, that I choose me over you, Mom. You know, I choose you in terms of how I love. I will continue to love you, but I will not sacrifice who I am for you. That level of boldness, that level of authenticity becomes a tool. It became a tool for me. And I would imagine that it has become a tool for a lot of people who've decided to re-embrace or now embrace their identity. So it was insane, but it's one of the things that I talk about. Even in my bio, I mentioned confrontation. And if you're a queer person, if you're a trans person, you know that confrontation is the name of the game, right? You know that we're literally depending on cisgender, often white folks, to let us know that we can now be free to be ourselves. We can now be free to use the bathroom. We can now be free to be seen publicly. We can now be free to marry each other. And there is a level of pride and there's a level of truth telling that we have to do in order to move forward. And I think that's an important part that I want everyone who is here to be able to embrace, that you are the plug. You know, you are the answer. You are the one that bridges the gap. You know, I think about the masculinity and the femininity that runs through our experience, that runs through our community. And without that, the world would be a very, very shitty place. It would be a horrific place. And it's time that we re-embrace and own that, you know? And today, I get to speak all over the world about my experience as a Black gay man. You know, that's a far cry from feeling like I had to stuff my gayness into the bottom of my gym bag to evade getting my ass beat. And now I get invited all over the place to speak. So it's really, really exciting. And, you know, my show, The Grapevine, also provides a space for all people, all walks of life to authentically, you know, provide insight into the world. And queer and trans people in particular are the folks that I see next rising up and solving a lot of the world's problems. Honestly, I say that we're angels on earth. And now that may seem a little narcissistic, but I find it to be true, because while we make the world very beautiful, right? You know, we give you a good beat, we'll teach you the choreography, we'll get your hair laid, we'll make you look great, and we'll show you how to pump in some heels, but we're so much more than that, you know? And I just really hope that we learn to embrace those things. So it's our job to be bold and to be truthful and showcase the power of our experience and our knowledge. So, you know, I'll end up by saying, like, why should we live our lives hiding, right? Or in camouflage, hoping to blend in, when we can live our life in color, right? By embracing the rainbow. It's a fucking rainbow. Like, taste it, enjoy it, wrap yourself in it, and be proud of who you are. And that's I tell myself that constantly, all day. You know, when I step in a room, I'm the only Black man, I'm the only Black gay man. I have to do that confidently. And finally, I believe that. And so the secret for us is that our truth is an endless resource of power, and it's our job to tap into that. So, you know, I will say, ask yourself, are you living your life in color? Are you being bold? Are you showing up as your full self? Because fundamentally, if you ask yourself powerful questions, I believe that you'll get powerful answers in return. And, you know, I can go on and on and on about this, but I really, really want to speak with Sarah, and I really want to speak with some of the people on the call as well about some of the experiences you all are having, and if you have questions about mine. But what the biggest takeaway from this that I want you to have is that oftentimes we're relegated to the outskirts of the world. We're so late in the conversation, but I want you to understand that the biggest revolutionaries in the world, the people who stand up for freedom, the most talented people, are oftentimes queer people. They're queer, they're trans, you know, they're non-gender gender conforming people, and they are the future. So I encourage everyone to really, really tap into that, be bold, and find out what is it that you bring to the world, and embrace that and share it, because it's necessary. But yeah, we can get into it, Sarah, and just chat. It's my little spiel.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, they can type them in the Q&A, and also indicate if you want your camera to be turned on. Or Donovan, if you have any questions for anyone.
Yeah, I actually have a
Yeah.
question. I actually have questions for you. I mean, we can go
Yeah.
back and forth, but so I was in college a really long time ago, okay? Like I'm not, maybe you could see the wrinkles, but I've been out of college for a while. Tell me a little bit about your experience, you know, being a person. I don't know how you identify, Sarah, but how has your experience been as like a Gen Z, and what things are like now? Is the world more open than I described for you, or do you understand or can mirror some of my experiences?
So I would say even like just growing up, I grew up in a very like gay friendly community, gay friendly school. I didn't realize I was gay until college, but even that was like very low key, like not a big deal. And now I'm in grad school, and I hang out with the queer community a lot, and that's sort of where I, live my life now. But um, so yeah, I definitely would say I had a different experience than you, but I don't
Well,
know
I
if
love
that's everyone in my generation. It
that.
definitely depends on your background.
Yeah, like where you are, what school you're attending, your
Yeah,
culture, et cetera, et cetera. But that's really encouraging to hear, because that's literally my dream. You know, wherever I go, I talk to folks, and sometimes the younger people in other places of the world are having a bit of a rougher time. But that's the dream, that you can be yourself and not even think of it as a thing.
mm-hmm.
That's liberation right there. So that's great. I hope, is that your experience as well, Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think it really does depend on the situation, on the person, on where they grew up. I know,
Mhm.
I've had queer friends that I've met that have had both good experiences and not so great experiences. My
Okay.
own coming out experience with my parents was not so pleasant, and
Right.
eventually we resolved things. But I did identify with a lot of what your story was like, and so I do think we're moving in a general direction where you know, especially at somewhere like Rice, people are just a lot more open and friendly with each other. And it's really, really heartwarming for me, at least, to see that sort of gradual shift happening.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's important. You know, it's so funny because I think to myself, you know, Gen Z, they're fine. Like, and it'd be like, we're the psychopaths, because I have conversations all of the time with different kinds of people, but there's this gap. There's this gap. I was recording a show yesterday for the Grapevine. Very, very tough conversation. It wasn't about queer identity. It was not about trans identity or anything like that, but it involved different cultures. So we were right now there's a lot of violence happening around, and we were talking with the Asian community and the Black community. And the Gen Z folks on the panel, completely different than the millennials on the panel, in terms of, it's ridiculous some of the things that we argue about. It's ridiculous some of the sticking points. So one of them that I cannot easily identify is culture and religion, right? Culture and religion are two things and politics, but culture and religion mostly will keep people on opposite sides of the aisle. Did you find within your experience that religion or anything like that played a part in how you were able to forge relationships, or with your family, or even with your conversations with your friends now? Does religion come up as a hindrance to like being out and free? I mean, that's for anybody in the audience, but I'm specifically asking you two, Sarah. Oh, people are asking questions.
Yeah, people are asking some
Oh,
questions.
maybe we should get to that.
Yeah,
So,
to answer your question briefly, I haven't
okay,
noticed religion as a big part of like my life or anyone
yeah,
else's life.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I mean, our family isn't super religious.
okay.
Um, so I don't think I can really speak to that experience. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
I mean,
don't think that that's a bad thing. I do personally believe that it's great to have, like, think about something, or how we connect with each other, and think about what that means. What do you call that connection that we all have? I personally call it God, but I could not identify with the religion thing at all. And I'm kind of glad that you guys didn't have that experience, because it was pretty awful. It was pretty torturous. It was
Yeah.
pretty terrible. So I don't know, Sarah, are you going to read those questions?
Yeah, I can read. The first question here is, can you talk a bit about how you handle losing friends? A lot of times I struggle with the concept of social isolation if I out myself to people that I'm friendly with.
Wow, that's a real ass question. Um, I'll talk to you about losing friends. So I think as a result of seeing and understanding that the landscape of people, it was unpredictable. Like, it was hard to tell who was going to react well and who wasn't going to react well. But I think I got to a place where All I needed was one friend. I don't know if anybody can relate to that, but at that time, I was so desperate for a connection that all I needed was one, and that was enough for me. And like I said, I was very fortunate to find my friend Donnie. Everyone else, I was willing to lose. I didn't give a fuck. The most important thing to me was that I can feel and experience love because I felt that I deserved that at my core. The goal is that there's a message that comes down in the pipeline through media and through many resources that we're not quite lovable enough and that we don't deserve authentic friendship. So we have that disposition. And then we think, oh, well, if we lose friends, then that's a bad thing. But I would argue that that's a good thing. If you have friends who don't want to be your friend because you're a queer person that is not your friend, that is someone who's probably going through their own shit and who cannot yet find the empathy for you. And they don't have the capacity. And that's okay. And the chances are that they probably could not be a good friend or the friend that you need when you have to be authentically yourself. If there's no authenticity, there's not a real relationship. And that's just a part of the growing pains. So if you find one friend, one homie that you can be authentic with, you're in a really, really good position. And you can slowly build from that. Because what I found, and I have a career where I'm always speaking to people, I'm always surrounded by a lot of people, but I can count the number of my friends on my hand. And it's made me a better person because the relationships that I have are saturated with authenticity and realness. I'd rather have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 good friends than to have a couple of many who I can't tell my truth to. I hope that answers your question, in that to deal with it, it's really about loving yourself first and teaching people how to love you. And the people who can get with that program are invited to the party. Outside of that, they can kick rocks, period.
Okay, yeah, I agree with all of that. We got a few more questions here. The next is, what do you think is the best way we can advocate for LGBTQ plus people around the world?
Yes, yes, yes. First of all, I love that question. That's my job, right? Like, to advocate for Black people, queer people, people of color all over the world. And listen, everybody does their thing. You know, a lot of times because of the society that we live in, we all think that we need to be the star, lights, camera, action. So you may feel like you need to write the book. You feel like you need to be the one to facilitate the experience, to facilitate the program. And I think that it's wherever you fit in, you have to do your advocacy work. So that means that if you're a teacher or if your aspirations is to teach, you have to remember there are going to be children, there are going to be students in this specific, whatever school that are going to need special attention because they're different. How do I nurture that? You may be someone who's in the public speaking space. How do you nurture that? You may be a doctor. How do you nurture that? You have to fit in where you can. In terms of the global perspective, right now, if you are in Uganda, for example, you can be killed and no one will care. In Jamaica right now, there are queer people living in gullies that no one cares about. Gullies is just essentially like a sewer. It's essentially like being under a bridge with no family. And that's common. And it's very generally accepted. So although we have great experiences here in America, I think that question about how do you speak up and advocate for queer and trans people all over the world, it's something that we also need innovation. So when you're in a corporation, for example, once you guys are out of school and you get into like the corporate space, this should be a question that you ask your corporation. What are you doing with the queer community? What are you doing to advocate for this? What are you doing to advocate for that? Join groups, join communities, and you'll find that there are already people doing a lot of great work. So until you figure out what your addition is, please feel free to support the people who are already doing the work. Elevate those voices, share those stories. Let your family, let your friends know that these are things that they need to be paying attention to. And those little things eventually become big things. And then you'll have something to stand on. And then you'll be able to step into the light if you want to share your story. But at a basic level, sharing your story and being authentic will then help. It will help people and it will have far reach globally. That's what I believe.
Yeah, okay. So this person says, I came out to my sister as non-binary and talked to her about my fear about coming out to our mom. She asked me why I would do that if she's not going to understand. Any advice or thoughts?
Wow. Well, good luck with that with your sister, because, listen, here's the thing. There is this, I don't know where that person is from, I would love to know where they're from and their background. But essentially, that's the way it works in my family too. I had a conversation in that coming out story. The thing that I did not mention was that one of my sisters was there at the table when I was having that conversation with my mom. Was like, "You're gonna get HIV and die." And I told my sister that I was gay prior to that conversation. But when we were all at the table together and they were getting in on me, my sister said, and I quote, "Now that we're all finding out this for the first time, we should be calm." You know, she left me in the wind to like be out there by myself. She didn't have my back at all. And what I realized is that she too was indoctrinated into the fear, right? She too was indoctrinated in feeling like, listen, we learned that this was a bad thing. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to be, why would you want to put her through that? Because they don't yet understand that that identity piece, that thing that's inside of you, is not something that you woke up one day and said, hey, I'm non-binary. Let me go and just fuck everyone's life up. But something rather that you've been living with. So my advice is that this is not going to be easy. I believe that progress is confrontation and empathy. Confrontation doesn't always have to be bad. Confrontation is being willing to say, this is what it is. This is the truth on this side. You can tell me your truth on this side. That empathy piece is what helps bring people closer and closer and closer and closer together. Because of the fact of the matter is that that's your mom. And she loves you. She may not know how because she may think that you're different. She may have to unlearn things, but at the end of the day, your mom is a regular woman who has some kids and brought them forth in hopes that they would have a specific life. And you're not exactly what she was hoping in terms of the way that you show up. Perhaps your sister may agree with that sentiment, but you're perfect just the way that you are. It is your job to jump into the ring and be confrontational, but it does take bravery and it's not easy. And I think like that's a piece of it. You have to take your time. You have to be able to see the humanness in your mother. The lack of understanding is a part of that regular human shit. So for you, I think it's about cultivating a love for yourself that supersedes your need for your mother's approval, that supersedes the need for your sister's approval, and be dedicated to yourself. And once you do that, hopefully you can teach them how to properly treat you if they want to be in your company, if they want to be in your authentic experience. Make sure that they call you what you want to be called. Do not accept anything less. I found that when you stand up for yourself, people fall back.
Do you have any thoughts on the intersections of Blackness and queerness? I constantly feel like having to choose between the two while experiencing discrimination for both at the same time.
Woo! Oh God. Let me tell you that I talk about this often because this is my life. I've had conversations where people are like, well, which is it first? Are you Black first? Or are you gay first? Like, which one is it? What a stupid fucking question. Like, the thing is that queerness is not a choice. Trans, whatever, however we identify, you come up, you show up that way. And the whole fight in this life is to just be able to be yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just want to be able to be me. The Blackness, we can't hide it as well, right? So if I'm not speaking and I just stand like this and, you know, you get the beard, you know, maybe I'm a little safe, right? Oh, who knows what that is? But if I speak and I like do certain mannerisms, then all of a sudden, ooh, like, what is that? What is he? Like, what is that experience? And I experienced that first with the Black community. I experienced homophobia before I ever experienced racism. And a lot of Black people in particular don't like when I say that, but it's the fucking truth. So I personally will say that I will be honest. It's not your job to release who you are for anybody else. It is your job to stand in your truth, be authentic, and your queerness informs your Blackness, and your Blackness informs your queerness. White queer people, Black queer people have a very different experience, although we're queer, right? Straight Black people and queer Black people have a very different experience, even though we're Black. We can connect on certain things, but that does not mean that we're different. I would argue, that does not mean that we're the same. I would argue that our differences is what we need. The issue that the Black community has is that being so disenfranchised, also being raised in white supremacy and patriarchy, leads you to this place where you feel like we don't need any additives to this motherfucker. We don't need you to be gay on top of being Black, okay? Being Black is hard enough. And a lot of people with privilege in this space, because if you're a cisgender straight person in the Black community, there's some privilege there that they're not yet willing to accept. And that's a part of what's happening. That's a part of why they would want you to choose and be able to navigate. Am I Black first, or am I queer? Am I queer? Am I Black? Am I, which one of those things? But that is a conundrum that does not have an answer. The simple remedy is to just be able to walk into a space and be who you are. Gay, queer, Black, queer and trans Black people have a very specific experience that I believe solves a lot of the problems. Oftentimes I see like there are a lot of gender wars that happen across communities, but I see it in the Black community in particular. If you look at a gender war and you look in the middle of that gender war, you'll find queer Black people who are filling in gaps because we have masculinity at our hands, we have femininity at our hands, and we do this with it. So we have a lot of the answers. We have a lot of the solutions. So you have to stand up and you have to say, I am perfect the way that I am as Black and as queer. It may make you feel uncomfortable. You may feel like I have to choose, but that's bullshit, because I know how to get you man, and you woman to understand each other, because I've always lived in the middle. I've always had to find my space. It's actually a source of power, your Black identity, as well as your queerness and your gayness or your transness. And you have to see it that way so that when people confront you with it, you can turn that on its head and let them know that you're necessary. This perspective is necessary. And without it, we'd be ass out, for real. There would be no Beyonce without gay Black people. Do you know what I'm saying? There will not be anything without gay Black people. There would be no Martin Luther King without gay Black people. You have to stand up and stand in and let people know that we're necessary.
Yeah, I feel like just intersectionality can be discussed for an hour by itself.
Oh my gosh. It's crazy.
Yeah. A related question is, what are your thoughts on how to combat the discrimination within the queer community, especially on issues such as biphobia and racism?
Ooh, that's really, really tough. And thank you for that question, specifically about biphobia, and I would say transphobia in particular. It's a really, really good question. And I'm gonna admit that even for me, when I was coming up and in my 20s and I was dating, and I dated a couple of men who identified as bisexual. And in my mind, I was like, now you know you're gay, okay? Like, stop playing. You know you're gay, you just don't want to admit it. And, and now looking back, I was like, how stupid was I? You know what I mean? Like, how dumb was that? And it was a process. It was a process of combating it. So like, I identified that was in me. That was in me. That disconnect was in me. And I had to take responsibility for not being able to appreciate the way that somebody identified in their experience. How fucking arrogant is that, right? So a part of that is like responsibility of self. And I think that's what queer people have to deal with. I always say to people that it's so easy for the oppressed to become the oppressor. It's so easy. It's like having a mom and a dad. Your mom is patriarchy, your dad is white supremacy. You're gonna have some racist sensibilities. You're gonna have some problematic and homophobic sensibilities, some sexist sensibilities that trickled on it because that's what we were raised by. So a lot of that is going to exist in our own community. And another thing I would say about the trans community and the way that gay people I've witnessed treating trans people, which is very disrespectful oftentimes, is that I have a trans cousin. Her name is Drea. And I vividly remember Drea going through her transition. And I thought to myself, like, oh my God, am I supposed to walk in the street with Drea? Like, I have to be prepared to fight. I got to be able to fight because people are going to want to beat her ass, and I can't let them beat her ass. And I'm saying all of this, but what's underneath that is fear. What's underneath that is homophobia and transphobia. And I was willing to fight for myself. So why all of a sudden am I scared to fight for my trans cousin? Is this shame? What is this? So being 100% honest, I think that the community is at war because we're oftentimes siloed from each other. Lesbians don't talk to the gays enough. Trans folks don't feel safe around the gays. The lesbians feel like, well, what am I gonna do with trans people? Bisexual people are like, no one thinks that I'm real. We're so disconnected, and there's a real breakdown oftentimes because of our own internalized homophobia and transphobia and sexism. We do not value women in this society. We do not value femininity. And it's horrible because it shows up and it's insidious. So I think by first battling this intercommunal discord is to acknowledge the transphobia and the homophobia that we carry and call it what it is. and call it what it is. And also, I think Gen Z is better at this, but it's also about stepping into spaces that have other kinds of people in it. Making a trans friend, like seriously, like it's okay to be friends with people who are different than you. For me, that has opened up a door. I have trans friends, I have bisexual friends, I have gay friends, I have not gender non-conforming friends. I have so many different kinds of friends, and it's changed me. It's made me so much better of a man because I understand deeply what it means to want to be who you are, to be accepted for that, to be able to offer that acceptance, and to also offer empathy. And it's not an easy thing to do. But first, if you see homophobia, if you see transphobia, call it out. Call out those biases and be honest about it within yourself and when you see it. And I think that that will be the beginning of getting closer and closer and closer to each other. I feel like right now we do a lot of talking at each other sometimes. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I think it does.
Were there any more questions there? Because I have a question too.
Oh, awesome.
There are none in the chat, so go ahead.
Okay. So I know you mentioned like you had this moment of realization when you were 22. Can you talk to us about what kind of triggered that and just
Yeah,
describe that situation? Maybe you did and I missed it, but just the details
yeah.
around that moment.
Yes. You know, I would say it was a combination of things. So 22, 23, 24, that was around the age that I was leaving college, really, really about to step out into the real world. And a lot of times right before you get that job, a lot of us head back home. And for me, going back home felt like there was a gray cloud of darkness that was coming and trying to get me. And I was willing to do anything to not experience that again. I was stepping into my manhood at 22, 23 and really fighting an identity. And I no longer related to my family. You know, I no longer related to feeling weak or less than, or that I didn't deserve love. I was more comfortable with creating a space for myself. So I actually ran away. Like, I had a real runaway experience at 23 years old. I ran away. I didn't tell my parents where I was. I was staying with friends for months. I did not return any phone calls. I didn't speak to anybody. A part of that was, you know, avoidance, right? And then the other part of it was the necessity to get that bravery, have those conversations with myself, ask those powerful questions. And I absolutely ran away. Like I mentioned, I was singing. I went to Switzerland. I was singing over there. I went to Austria. I was singing there. I did everything to get away and took a little bit of a break before I got into the corporate space for real, for real. And in that experience, I would say that I chose myself. And I didn't give two shits about how it made anybody feel. And what happened was, Ijeoma, is that when I came back from having my family experience what life would be like without me, they adjusted. And when I came back, they were very respectful about my boundaries, about my opinions. Later on, I did my like official coming out, but they were very, okay, don't fuck with him because he might just not ever show up again. And it's something that happened organically, but it worked out to be for the benefit. And so that was the real catalyst for change, not wanting to go back to that place because I was depressed. I was thinking about committing suicide. You know, I had a lot of really, really dark thoughts. And I knew that there was a better life. I knew that there was a better life where I could receive love. And going back to those walls where someone was going to tell me what to do and when I can come in and when I can go was a prison cell that I was not willing to check myself into. It was not going to happen. So that's what caused that at that age. Yeah.
Okay, there was one more comment here saying, this is such an amazing discussion. Thank you. Any contact info or social media to follow your work and keep in touch?
Yes, absolutely. So you can find me at I_am_Donovan on social media. And the biggest thing is that, and I also have a podcast called No Days Off, which I'm revamping and it's coming back in 3 weeks. And that's NODAZEOFF. You can find that on any podcasting network. But the other thing is the Grapevine TV. I would love for you to check it out, right, students? And I want you to also know that we're inviting Gen Zs onto the show. We had some amazing 18 and 19-year-olds on the conversation yesterday, and they are amazing. So this is the kind of work that we continuously do. We talk about queer, we talk about Black, we talk about color, we talk about sex, we talk about relationships, we talk about, you know, our like family dynamics, respectability politics, cancel culture. Like we talk about all of these things in hopes of moving culture forward. So I really appreciate that. And I would definitely say to follow us and join in on these conversations, because there's a whole world where we're engaged in these types of conversations because we want to create a better world for ourselves and for our children and for the next generation. So thank you for that.
Perfect. And another question, how do you have the courage to choose yourself? I feel it's so difficult when the world makes you feel selfish for doing so.
Oh my God. Wow. Isn't that terrible when the world makes you feel selfish for choosing yourself? How ironic when we're living in a capitalist society where like 7 families own the majority of the wealth in the country. But anyway, that's a whole other subject. But I think choosing yourself is a moment by moment basis, and it's a negotiation. Everything's a negotiation. Every relationship is a negotiation. Like, what are your boundaries and what are you willing to accept? Right? Because when you accept certain things, it makes you feel a certain way, right? Like, so when my mother told me that she'd rather me be dead than gay, I was like, I don't want to be dead. I had thoughts of suicide, but I don't want to be dead. Rather, I want to be able, my conflict is that I want to be loved. Like, in what world is that selfish? In what world is it selfish to want to experience love just like everybody else? If anything, here's what we do. It's selfish for straight people to feel like they own the conversation of being able to have access to love. That's selfish. And it's extremely unconscionable to like have that disposition to think that these folks who want to have access to love and their authenticity, it's selfish, but I can be clear and free to do whatever I want. I think it's really, really important to recognize what I call the matrix versus real life. So the matrix says that the world is what we say it is. So the world is right now, it's about having a big booty, it's about having light skin, it's about having money, and it's about having a lot of followers. That's what the matrix says. But in the real world, it says that you don't look like what that picture looked like because you're not filtered like that. The real world says that you have to pay your bills just like everybody else. The real world says that everybody knows somebody who died from COVID. You know, the real world is completely different than this other world. And I think it's important to recognize that. Have those moments where you say, I'm stepping out of the matrix and I'm going to choose myself, because what people are saying and what they want me to do is not real. I cannot make myself now love women. That's not real. I cannot now make myself into John Legend or be able to become rich like Diddy. Like, that's not fucking real. The reality is that they did a lot to get what they have, and they do a lot of maintaining a facade that's not real. So I would say, do not allow people to suck you in to something that's not real. It's not selfish to want to experience love. It's not selfish to choose yourself and the reality of your experience and forfeit that for somebody's lie about what is. It's a mind fuck. And once you realize that it's a mind fuck, you can step outside of that, step outside of the matrix, and be honest and deal with the downfall. You know, the outcome may be some, oh, you're selfish because you wanna be you. Ew. That's okay. You got it. You got it, boo. I'm selfish. Thank you very much. You know, and that's it. You know, I hope that wasn't reductive, but that is my genuine answer. Like, a lot of this shit that people say, my mother, you're gonna get HIV and die, or that, you know, you're not gonna have a good life. It's a lie. I get paid to speak all around the world. If I believed what people told me, I would be pushing papers somewhere in an office, hating my life, making sure that I don't get seen. And that's not our job. Our job is to honor ourselves and make sure that we're seen fully as who we are. They can call it selfish if they want to, you know?
That's so awesome. I just want to grab my heart with everything you just said. I know that there's not a chat box here, but in the Q&A, you all are welcome to share any takeaways that you gathered from hearing Donovan speak. Just any phrase or sentence that that will stay with you. Please share it, because we want to know what they are. We want to be reminded of what they are from what Donovan was saying. So if you can, just go ahead and do that. And if you still have any questions, feel free to ask them.
And I'll just say the last thing, this concept, because I do want you to carry this idea of camouflage versus the rainbow to the last question, selfishness versus authenticity. I just want you to remember that blending in does not make anyone happy unless you have severe anxiety about someone saying something to you for being who you are, right? Or if you have anxiety, period. And there are different ways of combating anxiety. But whenever you find yourself in a position where you don't feel like you can be yourself and you have to camouflage, just remember that's not you. That's not who you are. That's not the experience. You are a part of a very, very colorful universe that longs to embrace you. So just remember that. Remember that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Sarah, you want to read a couple of the statements there?
Yeah, sure. So this has been so motivational and helpful. I'm going to keep the idea of queer people being the angels of earth close to my heart.
Yeah.
Bold and authentic is so hard, but I'm going to work on this and empathy for myself and others. Thank you.
Wow. No, thank you. Yeah, wow. That's beautiful. Love yourself.
Said, my favorite quote, that queer and trans people will be the next group to rise up and change the world.
Oh, for sure. And just so you know, I'm working on documentaries. I'm working on television shows. We're coming out boldly.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't stop here. You know,
Absolutely.
I'm excited about the future for real.
Yeah. I'll share. Well, for me, I've just been taking notes on a lot of the things that you're saying. It's like, oh, that was good. You said progress equals confrontation plus empathy. And that's so good to remember that. It's so helpful. That confrontation, I know that there's the word carefrontation. You do it because you care. And if you tag it with the empathy piece, you know, empathy allows other people to be open about what, you know, you're saying, because you're able to relate to them and understand where they're coming from. So that kind of has a disarming sort of effect. So then it leaves room for openness, and then you could deliver the carefrontation in order to achieve the progress. So I love that formula that you provided. It's going to stay with me. So C plus E equals P, right?
Okay. Yes, that's right. I love that carefrontation. I love that. That's really great too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you also said our differences are what we need. What we need. It's necessary. I don't know. That for me, that just is powerful. And oftentimes people think that their differences are deficiencies, when it's not. It's your superpower. It's what is actually necessary. Right. Yeah. In a situation.
Facts.
I love how you said, because I'm a Beyonce fan, right? There would be no Beyonce without queer people. And that is so true. And just, and the analogy of the Matrix versus reality. Oh my God, I'm carrying that with me. I won't even start dissecting that. And someone asked the question about, well, how do you be more courageous? And the courage, you said, is motivated by wanting to experience love. There is nothing wrong with that. So by being, you know, you could rest assured in knowing that you can be courageous in speaking your truth and being authentic, because all you're wanting is to experience love. What is wrong with that? Right. So I just thought, you know, those things that you said were really powerful. I know, Sarah, there's some more takeaways here, I think.
Yeah. Someone just said I need a transcript of this whole talk, and that's my favorite part.
Well, there will be a recording. If you did register for this program, I'm going to send out the evaluation, which I hope everyone can complete, to give us feedback on how we could consider some of your thoughts for future programs and so forth. But you will get a replay of this.
Okay. Beautiful.
Amazing. Then someone, just the quote, "The world does not want to see you blend in." It's so powerful.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Choosing myself is so important. I am constantly working on not minimizing myself and saying unapologetically, this is me.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. And it's a process. It's a process. And like I said, it's a constant negotiation, but it's like a muscle, and it'll expand and it'll get stronger and it'll get bigger, and you can carry other people on there as well as they build their muscles. And that's what we have to do for each other. And that's why that question about that intercommunal discord within the queer community is so important. And we have to fix that, because when we fix that, it will help make us even stronger. And it's that mentality that we need to have in order to move forward, because we are each pieces of the puzzle. all of us, one by one, not the gays, not the lesbians, not, all of us were a part of that. And we have to be able to see the value in each other. And I've learned that I better I have a clearer vision of people's value when I'm really, really, really like kind of like planted in my value. Like, and understanding who I am and understanding my experience, I'm way more open to understanding the experiences of others. And that's the missing piece, because when you're scared to be yourself and people have the audacity to be themselves, sometimes you look at that and you're like, oh, no, I don't do that. You know, the first thing is to judge because you haven't yet done that in yourself. So it's just an important part of that to maintain and go to the batting cage with yourself. Sometimes the enemy is you, you know, saying to yourself, I can't do that, I can't say that. Yes, you can. Do it, say it, be you, you know? So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Sarah, for your facilitation. And thank you, Donovan, for being here with us.
My
I know
pleasure.
it's chilly in New York where you are. I hope you stay
Yeah.
warm. We're sending you some warmth. Is it even warm outside in Houston? I have no idea.
Woman in here, I'll take it.
Yeah, we're sending you some warmth. And I'm just wishing everyone a positive rest of the week. Donovan, do you have any quick last comments to share before we close it out for the evening?
Yeah. My last thing is that, you know, once again, I told you what to follow, you know, check us out at the Grapevine TV. But right now, after you leave this conversation, this is going to sound really, really fucking corny. But what I know is that what you're experiencing, sometimes it may feel like torture. It may feel like an awful experience, but it's really, really good to write it down. Queer people, the stories that you're living right now will one day be the stories that will help future generations move past and move through. You may come across somebody who needs advice to move past and move through. Write it down. I really, really wish if I wrote down some of the things that I experienced when I was coming up. Right now, I'm in the process of even writing a book, and I really wish if I had some of those notes. So write those things down. And also, secondly, facilitate experiences for yourself that mirror what just happened here. Go into your spaces, find your friends, say, hey, I want to have this conversation tonight. Invite 3 of your friends, social distance, invite 3 of your friends and have these conversations and continue to go through these concepts with each other. Last thing, don't think about this idea of loneliness, empathy, spirituality, you know, confidence. Don't think about them as things that you can't touch. Think about them as real things. Empathy is about being able to see yourself in others. If you want to become a more empathetic person, spend more time with yourself. It takes it out of this space of being something that's in the air and like, I don't know, metaphysical, and it brings it to a place of reality. You know, confidence, bring it to a place of reality. What makes you feel confident? What makes you feel good? Ask these questions because they're powerful, and don't make life happen to you, right? Own it by being confrontational with yourself empathetically, right? Remember that, take that everywhere you go. Don't make it out there, bring it in here. Don't surrender to the matrix, spend time in your own reality. That's it.
Oh,
That's it.
beautiful. Thank you for this privilege to get to hear you speak. We really are thankful. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm so grateful, Ijeoma, Anthony, Sarah, everyone who's on this chat and Rice University for being bold and being brave and facilitating these kinds of conversations. I think you're leading the way. And for the people on this chat who are able to have this conversation, I would say like, you're well on your way. You're well on your way because you're looking and you're searching. And as you look and as you search, you'll find. So I'm excited about everyone's future. You're going to be fine. You're going to be great. You're going to do amazing things. And I'm excited for all of you. Seriously. Do the damn thing.
Okay. Amazing conversation. Thank you, everyone. Someone said church. And I just wanted to acknowledge those last 2 comments. So hope everyone has a great evening. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Peace.